Today on Talking Solutions, we are going to talk about JDRF, juvenile diabetes. In studio today, we've got Latoschka Nether Shelli Gialketsis. JDRF, I'm thinking that stands for Juvenile Diabetes. Is it Research Foundation?
That's correct.
That makes sense.
It's the acronym, yes.
You know, type 1 diabetes, there's a lot of talk about diabetes these days. Of course, I find that most of the discussions have to do with type 2.
Correct.
In many cases, non-insulin dependent. However, with type 1, simple explanations that your body does not produce insulin. Therefore, every case of juvenile diabetes, I would think, is insulin dependent.
Correct. It is an autoimmune disease where your body no longer makes the insulin. And as everyone might know, you do need the insulin to survive.
Shelli, what you're saying is that in some cases your body just stops producing it. Do we have kids who their body never produced insulin to start with?
Typically, a child, if they're diagnosed extremely young, their body may have shown signs, oftentimes misdiagnosed. Some physicians believe that the symptoms mirror the flu or some sort of viral infection, but the body slowly stops producing and the pancreas slowly shuts down. And that's what develops the case of the type 1 diabetes. One thing I do want to make reference to when we go back to the name and we talk about JDRF and juvenile diabetes research, we go by JDRF at this point in time because what's happened over the years, the notion that juvenile diabetes means that it affects children and children only is a misnomer. It starts many times in cases with younger children, but we are now seeing more cases of older people being diagnosed, well over 18, 21, some in their 30s being diagnosed with what's called juvenile diabetes or type 1 diabetes. Their pancreas has shut down on them. So getting away from the juvenile piece to it because we don't want that confusion out in the world anymore, but JDRF, we hold on to the name of who we are.
Another point with that is right now, over 85% of all people with T1D or type 1 diabetes are adults. With the name juvenile diabetes, some people used to think as well that the kids would grow out of it. They do not. There is no cure for it. So as our children progressively get older, they still have type 1 diabetes.
And are not juveniles anymore.
And are not juveniles anymore.
I know of a gentleman who had to be at least 60 when he was diagnosed with type 1. In my past old high school boyfriend way back in Kansas when I was growing up, his younger brother at about 12 was diagnosed with type 1. And I think all of us over the years hear about people who are in the spotlight who have helped to raise awareness of type 1 or juvenile diabetes, which we'll just refer to it as type 1 if that's easier to understand for everybody. Mary Tyler Moore, for decades, she has been identified as being a type 1.
One of our very, very big advocates for JDRF.
Yes.
Today we are talking JDRF. We have Latoschka and Shelli with us. If I could ask, and Latoschka, I'll start with you. What's your connection to type 1 diabetes?
We'll try and do this without a whole bunch of tears. My son was diagnosed with type 1 about 13 years ago. Actually, on March 22nd, it will be 13 years. He was 18 months of age, and he had some symptoms of what the physician believed was viral flu. He had tonsillitis earlier in the year and was not that, which we're finding is common with most of the children that are diagnosed, most families or most physicians, because people are not quite familiar with type 1 as much as they should be. Even physicians aren't familiar with the symptoms and the things to look out for. Well, he was diagnosed initially in the doctor's office, and then we were sent over to UMC for about a week where we spent the time with him connected to a whole bunch of tubes and, as he likes to refer to as his days of being a robot, about 13 years ago.
And your son was all of 18 months of age?
18 months. He is now a thriving, wonderful 14-year-old in 9th grade at Green Valley High School.
You're at a really good stage of life. Boy, having a teenager, that's always fun now, isn't it? But when he was diagnosed at 18 months, the doctor would have probably told you that this is a situation that he'll be living with. There is no cure. This is just a situation one that is going to be a daily issue.
Yes, and that was the initial information that was given 13 years ago, which I have to say we can't be any more grateful for JDRF because they were the initial contacts that we made in the hospital. We started a connection with them, getting some information, learning about different things. My son started out when he was first diagnosed getting about 200 shots a month of insulin because in order for them to survive, they have to be able to get insulin during meals, before food served, anything like that. When you drink juice, you have to get insulin. When you eat something, you have to get insulin. So it would average about 200 shots per month. In that time, due to all the research in the type 1 diabetes field, thanks to JDRF and organizations that support that type of research, we've seen things progress from the initial shots of insulin through needles go to insulin pumps.
Yeah, pumps.
Yeah, which kids can wear or people can wear, in most cases for 7 to 10 days, depending on who you are at a time. They have CGMs that you can monitor even on your phone to see where the glucose levels are. There's so many progressions that we've seen just in the last 13 years that are simply amazing.
Technology. Your smartphone is really smart at the point where it knows your glucose level.
It's becoming very, very smart for us right now.
Latoschka, when your son was diagnosed at 18 months with type 1 diabetes, your first child?
He is my first and my only.
So you were dealing with, hi, I'm a new mom, and this is all stuff that I'm not used to doing anyway, and now let's throw 200 shots a month on top of everything else you were adjusting to.
Yeah. A new mom. I am what was considered an older mom. All of that all at one time.
I'm looking at you and I'm thinking you're a younger mom.
No, but thank you.
We can do a little comparison of the driver's license here in a minute if you want. Shelli, what is your connection to juvenile diabetes or type 1?
My connection is my daughter. Reed was diagnosed at the age of 7, and she is right now 19. Our story's a little bit different. We had been on a vacation back in my home state of Nebraska. She was kind of acting a little different. She was losing weight, we noticed. And with Reed, she also has celiac disease, which is a whole nother topic and a whole nother program. I figured maybe she had gotten back into some wheat or some gluten and was losing weight because of that. We got back to Las Vegas, and she still wasn't feeling very well. I had made an appointment with her pediatric gastroenterologist, and that night before her appointment the next day, she became very ill. Kind of graphic, but she was vomiting, and it was chunks. I have never seen anything like it. Her lips immediately became severely chapped. What it was she was going into DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis, if I'm saying that right, which is when your blood sugars are so high that your body produces a gas and you just got to get rid of it somehow. She was breathing as if she had been running and running and running. It was a panting. So she was very ill. Middle of the night, of course. None of these things ever seem to happen during the light of day.
No.
Never.
And I told my husband, that's it. I'm taking her to emergency. My husband, he's kind of what I call king of denial. Usually it's no, you're overreacting. He looked at Reed and said, take her. So I drove her to Sunrise Hospital at the time. That was kind of where all of us went. I pretty much had to carry her into the emergency room. When they took a look at her, I expected them to do the usual, have a seat, we'll get to you, and wait a while. They looked at her and took us back immediately, which is very scary as a mom. You know something's wrong then. It took them a little bit to tell me what was exactly going on. The physician that evening was an intern, so he couldn't actually say your child has type 1 diabetes without a formal evaluation from a doctor. But later he did come out, told me that I had a very, very sick little girl on my hands, and they admitted her into ICU immediately. She was there as well for a week. I think kind of back in the day, that used to be pretty much the standard.
Right.
And we waited at that time as well to see an endocrinologist, because they don't come around until the blood sugars become leveled out and stable. So it was about a week. I don't remember a lot of that time. It almost seems like it all happened one very, very long day.
Big blur.
Big blur. And we were the same. We were given some information, which at that point you were so overwhelmed. My daughter also went on insulin injections, multi-injections per day. And you just start a brand new way of life at that point. She now is 19. She is in college down at Concordia University in Irvine. She's taking care of herself. She, too, is on the pump. She's on an Omnipod. There are so many different types of pumps out there these days. She also has a continuous blood glucose monitor, otherwise known as a CGM. A lot easier to say the acronym. And Latoschka and I were talking every night before I go to bed, I check my phone to see what her blood sugars are. I think for most of us diabetic parents, it's the evenings, the night times that are so scary because you don't know what's going to happen overnight. One thing that I would like to add, cannot stress enough to parents out there, if your child is showing flu symptom-like signs and you take them to the doctor, very easy. Just ask them to check their blood sugars. Every doctor has a monitor right there in their office. We don't know why. We're trying, again, part of JDRF is to educate our pediatricians a lot more on the simplicity of finding out if a child could be a type 1 diabetic.
Right.
So just ask them, yeah, it looks like the flu. Could you just do a very quick finger prick with your blood glucose monitor and let's see where my children's sugar is?
You know, Shelli, when you were talking about your daughter Reed, when this first arose, this issue, and they were talking about her blood sugars being so incredibly high, I think it's important that everybody understands that it wasn't that she was sitting down just eating sugar.
Correct.
It was more that your body had ceased producing any insulin, which processes those sugars.
Absolutely.
Very true.
I don't want anybody to think that it's just an irresponsibility issue where I was sitting here eating donuts all day.
Correct.
And that's not how it works.
And I will say that is one of our regular daily fights when we see or hear, we like to say, uneducated people make comments or suggestions on how we should handle our type 1s. It has nothing to do with what they're eating or have not eaten or didn't do. This is by no fault of their own, a situation where their body has decided that it doesn't want to play nice anymore. Once the pancreas shuts down, which again is no fault of their own
or the
parents, once the pancreas shuts down, it is your autoimmune system shutting down. And we as parents have to take the responsibility and the next step to make sure that we do the balance for that autoimmune situation shutting down, and we now become that child's pancreas, or if it's an adult, then you have to start taking that matter into your own hands. It's not the fault of the person that is living with type 1.
Never.
It's a constant fight, and we see so many lovely remarks on the internet, and we hear so many comments on shows often with the uneducated making statements, well, you need to change your diet, or you need to stop eating this, or has nothing to do with the condition or disease that we live with.
No, certainly not. I would think it would be probably helpful to know glucose index levels on foods in general, just to know what foods might be problematic, what food might actually put me into more of a treacherous situation. I myself try to watch the glucose index on foods too. Not just people with type 1 or families dealing with type 1. Everybody should know what kind of foods will spike our blood sugar, whether or not we might be dealing with a diabetes situation, type 1 or type 2. Doesn't matter. Either way, we should know what are the foods that actually spike our blood levels.
Type 1 parents become excellent label readers.
Yes.
We live by labels. Carbohydrates and carbohydrate counts on any and all foods are what we live by. And if you're talking about people living with type 2 or people that are undiagnosed type 2s, those are things that they probably need to keep an eye on. High carbohydrates and high fats and things like that lead to weight gain. But again, you're talking about a completely different environment that type 2s live in than type 1s.
type 1 diabetes could be fatal?
Definitely. Yes. If the person does not receive the insulin, that's it. And that's one of the things that we worry about so much. As parents, we kind of keep talking about our children, but as we've said before, adults as well. If your blood sugars go too high, that's when you can go into the diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA. You can go into a coma. And also if they go too low, that's another thing to really, really be concerned about.
We've actually, in the entire state of Nevada, in the last month, have lost a couple of kids because of undiagnosed or misdiagnosed situations. There was a gentleman in northern Nevada that was 17 years old. Family believed that he was fighting the flu. Once he was taken to the hospital, and I've seen stories where the blood sugar was anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000.
Whoa, off the charts.
Off the charts. His organ system completely shut down, and he was at the point of no return. We talk about nights. Nights are the most fearful for our children and for the parents because those are the times where the body does what it does to catch up with the day that they had.
Sure, and we're not adding any food at this point in time.
No.
Correct.
And during the nighttime, everything that happened during the day suddenly hits you. So you could be dealing with extremely high blood sugars or extremely low blood sugars. And those things happen usually during the night. And if you have children that are in puberty or if they're in growth spurts, those things happen during the night too. You're dealing with that and constant adjusting. So typically, type 1 parents get little to no sleep. We maybe take shifts or we set our alarms to get up every 2 hours to go and check on our little ones or growing teens or,
And if there is a problem with that time in the middle of the night, if their blood sugars are too low, then you need to wake them up. They need to eat something. You need to wait 15 minutes, make sure that their blood sugars are coming back up. If they're not, then you eat something more. And at that point, it's very hard because they're very tired. Yeah. And same thing, if their blood sugars are too high, then you need to make sure that they wake up, that you give them a lot of water.
Lots of insulin.
And it just is ongoing.
Shelli, you're talking about your kids being tired. What about the parent who's up taking care of all of this?
That's why we say once you are given this diagnosis, it is life-changing. It is life-changing for the person living with diabetes. It is life-changing for the family of people that are living with diabetes because you all learn to live with it. It is an adjustment for the entire family.
Yeah, it's not just one individual.
No.
Correct. My daughter, I also have a son. And at times you worry that you're kind of forgetting about the other children that may be in the family and that they may not be getting the attention that they deserve as well. Mm-hmm. And that's very hard. So then you add that on top and it becomes a true balancing act.
Because that adds a whole different set of circumstances.
Yes,
because now you have a child who is suffering and probably acting out in some way. If it's not solved, they are needing more attention. They need more guidance. And they're seeing that other sibling who has type 1 needs all of this extra attention to thrive. Meanwhile, the other kid is like, wow,
what about me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That causes issues. Now, Latoschka, Shelli, as far as comparing type 1 or juvenile, I don't even want to call it that.
Don't even call it that anymore.
Type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes.
Right.
Certainly, type 2 has been exploding, and I attribute a lot of that to diet and lifestyle. That's a whole different issue. But is there a bigger instance these days of type 2 compared with type 1?
I know that type 1 definitely is on the rise as well, and that's something that the researchers that are funded through JDRF are really concerned about. What is it that is causing the numbers to increase? Some people say, oh, okay, you become type 1 because it's genetic. Well, not necessarily. Latoschka might not have anything in her family.
We don't.
My family, yes, we do. I have a nephew who is also type 1, my husband's brother's son. So you could think, well, then maybe that is genetic. Some people are also wondering if it's something environmental. I personally, just my opinion, think that might be something to look into. Why is it that now type 1 diabetes is becoming so much more prevalent?
Yeah.
Is there something that's happening? Is it that we are just becoming more educated and therefore it is diagnosed more often than misdiagnosed?
That's kind of where I lean towards. my hope and my belief is that it's not that we're suddenly developing more cases. I think with knowledge and with the information that's out there and people becoming more aware of the possibility of the diagnosis, that we are seeing more, if you will, because they're being diagnosed now and not misdiagnosed.
Improved detection techniques.
Absolutely.
Correct.
And so when you're in the doctor's office, could be with a child, could be an adult, and those flu-like type symptoms
Correct.
that, it's probably just the flu, wouldn't be a bad idea to ask the doctor at that point in time, you got your glucose detection techniques here nearby, it's easy to do. Could you just check the glucose level?
Every doctor's office that I know of has a glucose meter. It's a simple test. It's a simple finger prick at that particular moment in time. I mean, there's spikes in blood sugar that happens if someone just happened to leave a meal and they might have a small spike or maybe hadn't eaten in the morning. But there are trends. I mean, you can run a simple A1C test. It's not hard.
Well, and when you consider the consequences,
Absolutely.
going undetected,
Correct.
it's severe. It could be fatal.
Correct.
It's not going to be in every situation, of course, but it's a serious issue, so it's worth checking into.
Absolutely. And when we talk about type 1 and you bring up whether it's a fatal condition, while there are other conditions or diseases that are out there that drive much more attention, and yes, they can be fatal as well, we live with a constant 24-hour possible fatality situation when we talk about our type 1s if they are not cared for properly.
It's always there.
It's always there, never goes away, and it can affect our children rather quickly.
It's a serious issue. It's something certainly that can be lived with. It's
definitely.
extra
Absolutely.
problems, extra trouble, but
A little more work, but it's what you do.
I happen to think that life is worth the extra effort,
Absolutely.
Correct.
especially lived well. We've got Latoschka and Shelli in. We're talking about type 1, also referred to, put this out of your mind right after I say it, juvenile diabetes, but not always juvenile. A lot of adults have it. So type 1. There is an event coming up called Type 1 Nation with JDRF.
Yes.
Saturday the 12th, it looks like.
Yes, Saturday, March 12th. It's a full day of diabetes information sharing. Families that maybe believe that they were out there in the world by themselves with this new diagnosis. You get to meet other people, other families, other professionals, physicians that are aware of, have knowledge of, or are living with type 1. Symposiums start at 9 in the morning. We go until about 3:15. We invite families. We invite individuals that are living with type 1 or know someone with type 1 and they just want to get information to go to the site, register, and come out and join us for a full day of information.
Cashman Center,
Yes.
no cost involved.
No charge at all.
We've been doing this for almost 10 years now.
Right.
I was part of the very first one and have been to all of them. I think maybe I might have missed one. But I think one of the neatest things about the Type 1 Nation Summit is the bringing together of so many different professionals that are out there. These are not only people here within Las Vegas. They come from all over the nation. And to have an event that is free of charge and includes a free lunch, I might add, I don't think you could find this anywhere else. They are so interesting. Our family's been dealing with type 1, like I said, for 12 years now. I learn something new every time I go. People sometimes think, I've had type 1 forever. There's nothing new out there. Please come to the summit. You will be amazed at the information that JDRF is here to provide you.
With all the technology that we have and the forward movement, I'm sure, on being able to carefully monitor and manage a type 1 diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Latoschka, Shelli, after you both had dealt with this with your children, and I think you mentioned this too for a moment, Latoschka, about how important was the support and the knowledge that you gained from JDRF.
I don't know how we could have been able to move forward to understand what was happening in our lives if we did not have the contact and the support and the information that we got from JDRF. Between the summits and the staff in the office, the information that they share, the books, the training, I mean, there's so much outreach. There's a tremendous mentor program, outreach volunteerism with JDRF that there's no reason for families or even physicians or medical professionals in any area where JDRF is to not have knowledge of the things that are going on with JDRF with type 1.
Another point is with JDRF, I think one of our favorite things has probably been our Youth Ambassador program. For my daughter, when she first joined the program, it's for children who are type 1, say from kindergarten until you're a senior in high school. That allows the kids to realize they're not the only one out there. They too can meet and get to know other kids who are just like them. They get to hear other parents saying, did you count the carbs in what you're about to eat? Did you make sure that you were covered with your insulin, or bolus as the term is for us? It is a tremendous program. It also teaches our children how to advocate for themselves. They learn about type 1 and they learn what it means to explain it to others. Sometimes children get very fearful when they see our kids testing their blood sugars. Oh my gosh, there's blood. Am I going to catch whatever that is? They get to be able to tell their own story to their friends, and also sometimes they have to be the ones who advocate at the schools and inform their teachers and the administration of what is going on. That's one of the outreach programs I think that I am very, very happy that JDRF has provided our family.
If you know anyone who is affected by type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent, maybe you should consider next Saturday's 2016 Type 1 Nation Summit. It's the Nevada chapter of the JDRF at the Cashman Center, absolutely free of charge. You will get deep understanding for other people who also deal with the same thing on a daily basis, and that is hard to beat. Ladies, we want to thank you for coming in. We'd like to get the word out and make sure that other people who deal with type 1 diabetes know that there's an incredible support system out there, that there are people who understand what you're going through. That's worth its weight in gold. Latoschka Nether and Shelli Gialketsis, thank you so much for joining us today on Talking Solutions, and have a great time next Saturday at the Type 1 Summit.
Thank you.
Thank you again to all of our guests on today's edition of Talking Solutions. Latoschka Nether and Shelli Gialketsis from JDRF and the Type 1 Nation Summit for people with type 1 diabetes. And before that, it was Dr. Steve Book, the CEO of Faith Lutheran, talking about their event next Saturday, Igniting the Arts. As always, all the details are on our Talking Solutions Facebook page, including links and the podcast of the show. Already working on next week's show. Kevin Malone will be visiting from the DMV. Got all kinds of ways to keep you out of the lines at the Department of Motor Vehicles.
We keep expanding our online services. Just this past summer, we added movement permits. So if you have a car that, say, it's expired and you need to get a smog check on it, you can go online and get a movement permit instead of going into the DMV office to wait in line and have to get it.
So instead of going into the office,
you can go online and get a movement permit. And it's just like the number 4 top transaction we do. So that's the one we're targeting to get people out of the office. Another top transaction is canceling your registration. You want to put your car in storage, you're taking a trip, whatever. A lot of military people use that. You can go online and cancel your registration. Then you can drop the insurance without getting a fine. And those two things are a couple of our very top transactions, and we're trying to get people to do them online instead of visiting the office. The other thing we like to push is online vehicle registration. If you buy a car from a Nevada dealer or a truck or a motorcycle, you can go online and register it without going into the DMV.
That's big.
Yeah, it is. A lot of people don't know it yet.
Anything that can keep us out of the DMV, who wants to spend the time if I have the option of doing it online?
Right. You'd rather do it online.
Sure, and who wouldn't?
With the car registration, you can either transfer your existing plates or we'll just mail you new ones. You get a few choices on your license plate number, and you can just take care of that stuff online. What we like to say is just go to our website website first, which is dmvnv.com, and see if you have to come in, number one. If you do, make sure you have everything you need to get ready.
That's a good thing, too. So you don't waste a trip by getting up and they say, no, you need this form or you need to bring us this information before we can take care of your transaction. I'm in favor of doing anything I can online.
Yeah. With the DMV, you definitely should.
Yeah. You guys handle a lot of stuff. People are coming in for driver's tests and driver's licenses, and they need IDs. And there's, how many kinds of different plates do we have these days?
There's about 50 that are available to the public. Everything from classic vehicles to breast cancer awareness, missing and exploited children. We just came out with the City of Reno license plate, which probably won't be a big seller here in Las Vegas, but it should be up in Reno.
Yeah. Down here, not so much. We got the Las Vegas sign on the plate if you want to get that kind. I like the plates that have the animals.
The puppy and kitty plate, that's spay and neuter plate.
Yes.
And the bighorn sheep plates. There's 2 or 3 of those.
I like all of that.
The horsepower.
Yeah, I'm all for that. Kevin Malone from the Nevada DMV talking about some of the new things at the DMV and ways that you can take care of your business without actually stepping foot into the building.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Malone from the Nevada DMV on next week's show. Hope you can join us. Talking Solutions is a production of the Community Relations Department here at Beasley Media Group Las Vegas. Get more information on today's topic on our Talking Solutions page on Facebook, where you will also find links and a podcast of today's show. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.